Welcome to the Skills for Secondary School Success 4S curriculum professional development session on our last unit, Unit 5, Making a Difference. In this session, we will learn about the key activities in each lesson for Unit 5. There will also be opportunities for you to think about how you would teach these lessons with your specific students. It will be helpful to have your copy of the teacher's manual so you can follow along in a hard copy of the text as we proceed through this PD session. We will conclude with more time for reflection and discussion as we think about starting Unit 5 with students. As we have in all our previous PD sessions, we will begin our time together with a reflection as if we are in a connection circle. Although we will not be in a circle with other people today, it will still be helpful to reflect and connect with our experiences teaching the lessons in Unit 4, which is focused on helping students learn how to work with others more productively. Consider one or more of the following questions. What growth did you observe in students as active listeners? How did students respond to the empathy interviews? What changes in empathy are you hoping to see in students? How about in yourself as a teacher? Feel free to jot your ideas on a piece of paper or just hold your thoughts in your mind as you proceed through the rest of this session. For any of the reflection pages, feel free also to pause the video and think further about the questions and ideas before you move forward. In this section of the PD, we will provide an overview of the structure of Unit 5, Making a Difference. Then we will review each of the 9 lessons in the unit. It is important to introduce students to the Unit 5 essential question during the first lesson and remind students frequently of this question throughout the unit. This encourages students to think about how they can apply the things they've learned in this course so far to make a difference in their community. How might you respond to this question for yourself? Take a couple of minutes to jot down some thoughts or just hold your ideas in your mind as you continue with this session. The title of Lesson 1 is Expanding Our Circles of Concern. The main learning objective for the first lesson in Unit 5 is to lead students to explore social circles of concern and identify school community needs while connecting learnings from previous units. To reach this objective, students will engage in 3 main activities. In the first activity of Lesson 1, you will explain the meaning of circles of concern in this figure. Each of us can be concerned about many people in the world, starting with ourselves at the center of the circle and expanding in scope to include everyone on the earth. Students will then think about who they are concerned about beyond their immediate family and friends and why. In the second activity of Lesson 1, you will help students brainstorm important needs in the school community. Students will record their ideas about specific needs individually on their own charts, like the one pictured on this page. For this activity, students will only record their ideas in columns A and B. They will think about the ideas in the other columns in later lessons. These handouts are available in the Student Materials section for Unit 5 in this Google Classroom. It may be helpful to think of a way to ensure that these charts are not lost so that students can work with them during future lessons. After this individual work, students can also write some of their key ideas on Post-it notes and hang their ideas on a space designated for a class-wide wall of needs. In the third activity of Lesson 1, you will help students brainstorm ideas to learn about important needs in their neighborhood. Students will observe their neighborhood carefully, maybe in a walk after school, to determine a specific need that they might be able to address. They can record their observations and ideas in this community observation report form provided in the student materials section of Unit 5 in this Google Classroom. This fieldwork activity will help prepare students for the ideas in the next lesson of the unit. The title of Lesson 2 is Exploring Needs in My Neighborhood Community. The main learning objective for the second lesson in Unit 5 is to lead students to explore and identify neighborhood community needs while connecting what they learned in previous units. To reach this objective, students will engage in 3 main activities. In the first activity of Lesson 2, you will help students sketch a map of the neighborhood surrounding the school. During this process, you can facilitate a discussion about some of the following questions. Which buildings are important around the school? Why do you think so? And what are the building's defining characteristics? What is different in this neighborhood from other neighborhoods? What is special about it? In the second activity of Lesson 2, students will work in teams to brainstorm neighborhood community needs. They will record their ideas individually on their own charts, like the one pictured on this page. This chart is very similar to that used in Lesson 1, except that this chart focuses on neighborhood needs, whereas the chart in Lesson 1 focused on the needs of the school community. For this activity, students will only record their ideas in columns A and B. They will think about the ideas in the other columns in later lessons. These handouts are available in the Student Materials section for Unit 5 in this Google Classroom. Again, it may be helpful to think of a way to ensure that these charts are not lost so that students can work with them during future lessons. After this individual work, students can also write some of their key ideas on Post-it notes and add their ideas on a space designated for a class-wide wall of needs. In the third activity of Lesson 2, students will share the steps they have taken to learn more about the needs of their school or neighborhood community and what they have learned. While facilitating the sharing session, you can help students make plans to learn even more information. The title of Lesson 3 is Addressing School or Neighborhood Community Needs. The main learning objective for the third lesson in Unit 5 is to help students explore ways to address the school or neighborhood community needs they identified. To reach this objective, students will engage in 2 main activities. In the first activity of Lesson 3, students will share what additional information they learned from their information gathering efforts. They may share their written observations, photos, or videos. You can record this new information on a chart as the students share, so that the class can look for common themes across the needs that students identified. In the second activity of Lesson 3, students will brainstorm ways to meet their school or community neighborhood needs. Each student will decide whether to focus on the needs of their school community or neighborhood community. Then they will think about ways to meet the needs they identified in previous lessons using columns C, D, and E on their individual charts, like the one pictured on this page. It may be helpful to have extra copies of these charts available for students whose charts from previous lessons may be missing or who are absent on those days. Let's take some time to think about your reactions to these first 3 lessons. Please jot your thoughts down so you can refer to these ideas later. How important are these lessons on addressing school and community needs? How much instruction or guidance will students already have had on these topics? How do you think they will react to these lesson activities? Do you foresee any challenges as students interact with these lessons? And what ideas do you have for keeping students engaged? The title of Lesson 4 is Choosing a Project to Make a Difference. The main learning objective for the fourth lesson in Unit 5 is to lead students to select and start planning an individual or team community project using what they have learned from previous units. To reach this objective, students will engage in 3 main activities. In the first activity of Lesson 4, students will share the ideas they have previously written on their school or neighborhood community needs charts. They will then individually list their favorite ideas using the Possible Personal Contributions activity sheet. After students have had time to consider which idea is their top choice, you can facilitate each student sharing their choice and recording these ideas on a chart. Although students can work individually on their projects if they prefer, you can also encourage students who are interested in similar ideas to work together on a group project. Groups should not be bigger than 3 students so that each student can have a meaningful piece to contribute to the group. In the second activity of Lesson 4, you can more fully explain the project that will make up the remainder of Unit 5. Students will individually or in groups create a volunteer project plan by the end of the unit. They can present this plan as a written report, a slide presentation, a poster presentation, a blog post, a TikTok video, or an oral presentation. You can feel free to add or subtract ideas from these options as you see fit. In the third activity of Lesson 4, students individually or in their project groups will start planning for how they will complete the project using the My Team's Volunteer Project Plan worksheet as a guide. The title of Lesson 5 is Using Project Management Skills for Your Volunteer Project. The main learning objective for the 5th lesson in Unit 5 is to help students learn a transferable project management process as they design a plan for their volunteer project. To reach this objective, students will engage in 2 main activities. In the first activity of Lesson 5, you will explain the 4 D's of project management. These are define, design, do, debrief. In the second activity of Lesson 5, students will define and design their project individually or in their project groups. A planning worksheet is provided as a useful guide in the Student Materials section for Unit 5 in this Google Classroom. The title of Lesson 6 is Working on Project Proposals. The main learning objective for the 6th lesson in Unit 5 is to give students time and guidance as they work on their project proposals. To reach this objective, students will spend the entire period planning their project, researching necessary information, and organizing what they learned. Students will either work individually or in their project groups. While students are working, be sure to circulate to check on all students in groups, monitor their progress, and offer guidance, encouragement, and suggestions. If you are noticing common questions or needs across multiple students or groups, it can be useful to pause the whole class to communicate your guidance in a quick interruption. Also, for students working in groups, encouraging students to practice the active listening, conflict management, and empathy skills they learned in previous units can help reinforce learning from across the entire course. The title of Lesson 7 is Completing Project Proposals. The main learning objective for the 7th lesson in Unit 5 is to give students time and guidance as they complete their project proposals. To reach this objective, students will spend the entire period continuing to work individually or in project teams to complete their proposals and presentation material. Students and groups can also practice delivering their presentations if this is a part of their project. This practice can ensure that the presentation fits within the time limits and everyone knows which part to present. Similar to Lesson 6, be sure to circulate to check on all students and groups, monitor progress, and offer guidance, encouragement, and suggestions. In this lesson, you can particularly focus on whether all projects seem on track to finishing by the end of the period. Also, for students working in groups, continue encouraging students to practice the active listening, conflict management, and empathy skills they learned in previous units to reinforce learning from across the entire course. The title of Lesson 8 is Presentation of Project Proposals. The main learning objective for the 8th lesson in Unit 5 is to give students the opportunity to share their work with the class and outside visitors if possible. To reach this objective, students will present their work to the class and any outside visitors in attendance. Students who created projects that rely on a presentation format like oral presentations with digital slides or TikTok videos should go first. Then you can set up a gallery walk or poster session for students who created a visual display like a poster. To do this, you can divide the class into 2 groups. The first group will stand by their visual displays and answer questions as members of the second group, the audience, walk around the classroom and visit each display to ask questions and share thoughtful feedback. After a designated time, you can switch groups so that all students can be a part of the audience and also have a chance to present. If few students chose to create a visual display, you could have just one session in which the audience consists of those who created presentation projects. Let's take some time to think about your reactions to the final project. Please jot your thoughts down so you can refer to these ideas later. Do you feel that your students will enjoy planning a community project? What help will they need to successfully complete a project plan? How do you think they will react to these lesson activities? Do you foresee any challenges as students interact with these lessons? What ideas do you have for keeping them engaged? The title of Lesson 9 is Course Wrap-Up. The main learning objective for the 9th lesson in Unit 5 is to help students reflect on their learning in the course and how they will use it going forward. To reach this objective, students will engage in 2 main activities. You can prepare for the first activity of Lesson 9 by setting up 5 charts around your room, 1 chart for each of the 5 units in the 4S curriculum. Each of these charts will represent a different station for students to reflect on what they learned in that focus unit. At the beginning of the first activity, you will divide students into 5 groups and assign each group to start at a different station. Students in the group will then discuss together what they learned from the focus unit of their station. They will individually write the most important learning that they are taking away from the unit on a post-it and stick it to the chart at their station. After 3 minutes, you can direct groups to move to the next station and discuss what they learned from that unit. In the second activity of Lesson 9, students will reflect individually on their ideas about what they learned and how they can use this learning in the future. They can use the Looking Forward, Where Do I Go From Here reflection sheet provided in the Student Materials section for Unit 5 in this Google Classroom as a guide. Students may answer questions in any order they prefer. After students have had a chance to reflect on their own, you can facilitate a final group discussion so students can share some of their ideas about how to apply their new learning for their future success. Now that we have presented all the lesson activities in Unit 5, take a moment to review the sequence of these lessons across the unit and how the objectives of each lesson build on the previous lesson. Let's now take some time to think about your reactions to this final Unit 5. Please jot your thoughts down so you can refer to these ideas later. How do you see learning building across lessons? What issues might arise as students plan their projects? How will these lessons help your students be better prepared for high school and build upon the academic, social, and emotional skills learned in the earlier units? How can I make a difference in my students' lives? How can I help students work together to make a difference? This concludes Unit 5, Making a Difference. Again, the teacher's manual, all the classroom materials, student activity sheets, and PowerPoint presentations are posted in the 4S Google Classroom. Thank you so much for all your dedication with the previous units of the 4S program. We hope that Unit 5 can be a fulfilling culmination of all the learning throughout the course.